This presentation is about universal design for learning. Multiple children, multiple learning styles. Applying universal design for learning principles to math lesson plans. This presentation will begin with an overview. Next, we will discuss universal design for learning. Then, we will do an application activity to find universal design for learning elements in a lesson plan. We will conclude with a wrap-up. Welcome to the fourth mentor training. This session will explore a framework for designing curriculum that is accessible to all students. The outcomes for this presentation are 1. Describe 3 principles and guidelines of UDL. 2. Identify strategies for implementing UDL. 3. Explore units of measurement using the UDL approach. Last time, we talked about blended learning and how using technology can support and engage students' learning. One of the important benefits of using a blended learning approach is that the curriculum becomes more flexible and adaptable to meet each individual student's needs. In this workshop, we will learn about a framework to designing a curriculum that is flexible and adaptable to accommodate the differences in the way students learn. In this part of the presentation, we will introduce and discuss universal design for learning. Universal design for learning. Learning for all. Realizing that we are all different and learn differently helps us understand the importance of universal design for learning. Is our pedagogical environment welcoming? UDL is the proactive design of our courses to ensure they are educationally accessible regardless of learning style, physical or sensory abilities. Just as physical barriers exist in our physical environment, curricular barriers exist in our instructional environment. UDL is framed via asking the question, is our pedagogical environment welcoming? People learn in different ways. Another way to say this is that learners and students are diverse. There is no average student, and even if there was one, curricula should be designed with all students in mind. With the UDL framework, lessons are designed to be accessible to all students. This is accomplished by providing options and flexibility within the lesson to accommodate each student's needs and interests. Why UDL? Because students are diverse, and all students learn differently. How does this apply to the classroom? Well, every student is different, so every student learns differently. How is the curriculum disabling the student? When a student is having difficulties learning math or any other subject, what is the problem? There is no one answer, yet most often the student is identified as the problem. Many students often face many challenges in school. Perhaps they have difficulty understanding what the teacher or the textbook is saying. Perhaps they are unable to communicate or express what they understand and what they don't understand. These students may feel unsuccessful in their learning because there is a breakdown in communication somewhere between the lesson and the student and vice versa. In this way, the problem is not necessarily with the student at all, but with the way the student is expected to learn. Universal Design for Learning provides a blueprint for creating flexible goals, methods, materials, and assessments that accommodate learner differences. Classroom changes can help all learners. Educators know better than anyone that students learn in different ways and at different paces with different needs. For example, techniques we have found to help those with disabilities in the classroom can help everyone. UDL at a glance. Let's watch a video to introduce guidelines for creating UDL curricula. Then we'll go into the guidelines more in depth. UDL to support diverse abilities. Neuroscience reveals that learning differences are as varied and unique as our DNA or fingerprints. Three primary brain networks come into play. 1. Recognition networks, the what of learning. 2. Strategic networks, the how of learning. 3. Affective networks, the why of learning. The UDL guidelines are a tool used in the implementation of universal design for learning, a framework to improve and optimize teaching and learning for all people based on scientific insights into how humans learn. The UDL guidelines can be used by educators, curriculum developers, researchers, parents, and anyone else who wants to implement the UDL framework in a learning environment. These guidelines offer a set of concrete suggestions that can be applied to any discipline or domain to ensure that all learners can access and participate in meaningful, challenging learning opportunities. We'll now be looking into the UDL guidelines and how using different parts of the brain influences those guidelines. The UDL guidelines are not meant to be a prescription, but a set of suggestions that can be applied to reduce barriers and maximize learning opportunities for all learners. They can be mixed and matched according to specific learning goals, and can be applied to particular content areas and contexts. In many cases, educators find that they are already incorporating some aspects of these guidelines into their practice. However, barriers to the learning goal may still be present. We see the guidelines as a tool to support the development of a shared language in the design of goals, assessments, methods, and materials that lead to accessible, meaningful, and challenging learning experiences for all. Recognition networks, the what of learning. This includes how we gather facts and how we categorize what we see, hear, and read, such as with identifying words or sounds. How do we make the process of recognition easier for kids of all abilities? Learners differ in the ways that they perceive and comprehend information that is presented to them. For example, those with sensory disabilities, learning disabilities, language or cultural differences, and so forth may all require different ways of approaching content. Others may simply grasp information quicker or more efficiently through visual or auditory means rather than printed text. Also, learning and transfer of learning occurs when multiple representations are used because they allow students to make connections within as well as between concepts. In short, there is not one means of representation that will be optimal for all learners. Providing options for representation is essential. Recognition Networks UDL Guidelines. Provide options for perception. Interact with flexible content that doesn't depend on a single sense like sight, hearing, movement, or touch. Language and symbols. Communicate through languages that create a shared understanding. Comprehension. Construct meaning and generate new understandings. Strategic networks, the how of learning. This includes how we plan and perform tasks, and how we organize and express our ideas, such as in writing an essay or solving a math problem. How do we make the processes of organization and expression easier for kids of all abilities? Learners differ in the ways that they can navigate a learning environment and express what they know. For example, individuals with significant movement impairments, those who struggle with strategic and organizational abilities, those who have language barriers, and so forth, approach learning tasks very differently. Some may be able to express themselves well in written text but not speech, and vice versa. It should also be recognized that action and expression require a great deal of strategy, practice, and organization, and this is another area in which learners can differ. In reality, there is not one means of action and expression that will be optimal for all learners. Providing options for action and expression is essential. Strategic Networks UDL Guidelines. Provide options for physical action. Interact with accessible materials and tools. Expression and communication. Compose and share ideas using tools that help attain learning goals. Executive functions. Develop and act on plans to make the most out of learning. Affective networks. The why of learning. This includes how learners get engaged and stay motivated, and how they are challenged, excited, or interested. How do we keep all kids engaged and motivated? Affect represents a crucial element to learning, and learners differ markedly in the ways in which they can be engaged or motivated to learn. There are a variety of sources that can influence individual variation in affect, including neurology, culture, personal relevance, subjectivity, and background knowledge, along with a variety of other factors. Some learners are highly engaged by spontaneity and novelty, while others are disengaged, even frightened by those aspects, preferring strict routine. Some learners might like to work alone, while others prefer to work with their peers. In reality, there is not one means of engagement that will be optimal for all learners in all contexts. Providing multiple options for engagement is essential. Affective Networks UDL Guidelines. Provide options for recruiting interests, spark excitement and curiosity for learning, sustaining effort and persistence, tackle challenges with focus and determination, self-regulation, harness the power of emotions and motivation in learning. UDL. In summary, the UDL guidelines encourage multiple means of representation, or ways to present materials, expression, or ways to express what is learned, and engagement, ways to engage and motivate learners. Representation is how material is presented to a student, such as via text, lecture, or discussion. There is no one way of representing information that is optimal for all students. Expression is how a student shows you what they have learned, such as through exam, participation, or lab work. There is no one means of expressing knowledge that will be optimal for all students. Engagement is the level to which a student is able to attend to information and is motivated to learn. There is no one way to engage and motivate students. Example, presentation of information. Possible approach number 1. Offer at least 2 different presentations of course material, such as a textbook, lecture, transcript, digital or talking books, or student-prepared lecture. Example, presentation of information. Possible approach number 2. Offer at least 2 different ways to absorb the lecture material, such as with students take notes, students record the lecture, provide PowerPoint slides or lecture outlines, pause procedure, and guided notes. Guided notes. Guided notes give students an incomplete outline that helps guide them through a lecture but leaves gaps for note-taking. PowerPoint slides can also serve as guided notes. Example, presentation of information. Possible approach number 3. Take advantage of technology, such as through online research, using blogs and social networking sites to brainstorm topics and resources. Accessibility tools, such as screen readers and captioning. Have students try screen readers or captioning as delivery methods for information. iClicker device. How do your students learn? Visual, auditory, kinesthetic. It may be helpful to your students to learn more about how they prefer to learn. If your students do not already know what style of learning they prefer, you may be able to help them identify a style. For example, you can help them take an online learning style test. Knowing your preferred learning style is just one aspect to learning. It demonstrates that people learn in different ways. While it may not be able to fix every problem that your students face in the classroom, it may be a positive way that you as a mentor can supplement your students' learning. For example, if one of your students is more of a visual learner, it might be helpful to watch a video about the math topic or use graphic organizers to brainstorm, take notes, or organize their thoughts and ideas. If one of your students is more of an auditory learner, they might need someone to explain the math concepts to them, study and talk things out aloud, or learn to make up a song to learn a concept better. Even listening to music while they learn may help. If one of your students is more of a kinesthetic or tactile learner, it might be helpful to get their bodies moving while they are learning. This could mean being involved in some kind of hands-on and/or physical activity, learning a dance or motions while they are learning, or using manipulatives. You can even use strategies for multiple learning styles to approach supplementing your students' learning. In this part of the presentation, we explore an application of finding universal design for learning elements in a math lesson. Video of Na-Nakahi lesson. View the video at the link provided. This is a video of our staff and students at a math camp. The students are learning how the native Hawaiians used to measure things using their bodies. In this lesson, students practice measuring, recording, and sharing data, conversion, and ratios. First, the students are introduced to the different measurements. The students learn the measurements by getting up and making the measurements using their arms and hands. The measurements are projected on the whiteboard in addition to the instructor demonstrating the measurements. The students also receive a handout with a table organizing and summarizing the measurements. The table includes text and pictures. Next, the students compare the Hawaiian measurements to U.S. standard measurements. They measure the lengths of the Hawaiian measurements on their bodies. They practice measuring and recording data. They also practice conversions between units of measurement. They practice ratios by comparing the different Hawaiian units of measurement to each other. For example, 1 anana is equal to 4 ha'ilima. Then the students practice using the measurements. As a practice, they measured objects in and outside of the classroom in small groups. Then we went on a field trip and the students measured objects there too. The students took photos of the objects they measured the object using the Hawaiian units of measurement, recorded their data, and converted their measurement into U.S. standard measurements. Students could use any Hawaiian measurements they wanted to measure their objects. Lastly, the students shared the objects they measured and their data about the object measurements with the class. The photos the students took were projected for everyone to see. Let's watch the video. Can you spot examples of UDL in the lesson? How was UDL demonstrated? Could you find examples of multiple means of representation, multiple means of action and expression, and multiple means of engagement and motivation? Here are some examples. Multiple means of representation of information. 1. Measurements demonstrated by instructor physically, verbally, and visually. 2. Measurements were copied by students physically and verbally. 3. Measurements were projected on the whiteboard with text and pictures. 4. Measurements were organized in a table with text and pictures. Multiple means of action and expression of knowledge. 1. Students demonstrated the measurements with their bodies. 2. Students measured the body parts and recorded the information in a table. 3. Students measured various objects. 4. Students verbally and visually presented their measurements in a presentation. Multiple means of engagement and motivation to learn. 1. Students learned about how measurements relate to their everyday life and Hawaiian history. 2. Students could choose their role in their group. They could measure or be the group ruler. They could record data. They could take photos. 3. Students could choose the objects they wanted to measure. 4. Students could choose the objects to present in the presentation. We will conclude this presentation with a wrap-up. Summary of UDL. Universal design is for products, processes, and environments and helps everyone. UDL targets 3 brain processes: 1. Recognition, 2. Strategic, and 3. Effective. UDL uses 3 guiding principles. 1. Multiple means of representation of information. 2. Multiple means of action and expression of knowledge. And 3. Multiple means of engagement and motivation to learn. UDL resources. Find a list of websites, guides, and FAQs and videos about UDL at the given link. Thank you for viewing this presentation on Universal Design for Learning. Our next presentation will be about problem-based learning, using math to help others, Kokua Kekahi Ikekahi, problem-based learning enrichment activity.